So in the book of Genesis, God, after he creates Adam, says, I'll make him a helper. I'll make him a helper. Suitable for him. God creates Adam. Adam is looking at all the animals. And God says, I'll create him a helper. It's offensive to many girls. By the way, I'm picking verses that were told to me that are considered offensive.
But other translations say peer, means equal.
Okay, actually, if you look at the original text, it's actually helper. And we're gonna get into all of this. Okay, let's just take it step by step. Okay, this is slide number 1, the very first verse. Yes.
No, I was gonna say in the New Testament, when he says, "I will send you a helper" in terms of the Holy Spirit, he actually uses the same word.
Excellent. Very good. Very good. You guys are way ahead. Excellent. But let's pretend he never said that. Okay? Because I want everybody to get upset with me. Let's get upset first. Okay? He shall rule over you. He shall rule over you. Man shall rule over woman. Offensive? Rule over me. Some of the guys are like, that's right. It's not offensive, that's reality. Is it? I personally, as a man, think that it's offensive for anyone to say that I should rule over my wife like she's a peasant or a servant. I agree with the woman, to be honest with you, man. When I read this, I really did, and this is early on, when I was beginning to, give lectures and stuff like this, is when people would come up to me and ask me, what does this verse mean? How can we believe in a God? I thought God was, what is this? Does the Bible contradict? What's going on? Is this real? Am I supposed to believe this? How about this one?
Can I interrupt you?
No, not yet.
The Hebrew
not
word
yet.
is
Please,
either.
please.
I'm
not yet.
supporting
no,
you.
I know that, but not yet. Thank you. Not yet. The man is the head of the woman. I know exactly where you're going, and I'm going to pick on you to answer the question, but not right now.
No problem.
Agreed? The man is the head of the woman. The head of the woman. Offensive? How about this one? Man wasn't created for the woman, but woman was in fact created for the man. I'm pulling verses out of what people tell me are offensive. How about this one? Let your women keep silent in the churches, so they are not permitted to speak, for it is shameful for women to speak in church. Yeah. The drama that follows. Poor women having to deal with this verse for hundreds of years. And let me tell you something right now. It doesn't matter how much research I've done on this, and how much prayer or reading the Bible or whatever. I can't wait to hear what Abuna has to say about all of this. Because whatever he says, and I'm so glad you're here for this particular topic, actually. Because whatever he says is going to blow our minds. Okay? So stay tuned. Okay? All right. Wives, submit to your own husband. Now, submit. You want me to submit? What does that mean, submit? When do we normally read this particular verse? Can anybody tell me? What occasion? Weddings, right? During weddings. Let me tell you something right now, okay? Every wedding. Every single wedding. When that verse is being read, I look around the church. I'm going to admit, I've done it, okay? And the husband's looking at the wife like, see, I told you. Well, why? No problem. But of course, you don't want to submit. I've done it. And I'm telling you right now, look around and you will see people at the next wedding. Just wait for that verse. Okay? Wait for when we read the Pauline epistle. Okay. But I'm a little confused. Okay? Because I want everyone to focus on 3 words for the rest of this discussion to help us understand what's going on. The first word is context. This applies to everything and anything you read in the world. Any book, any article, anything. It's not just the Bible. I'm not going to give you these terms just to use for the Bible. These are words that you have to take into consideration, concepts that you have to apply to anything you read, ever. You have to understand what the context of what you're reading is. What does that mean, the context? In other words, I can never, ever take one sentence out of a book and say, based on this sentence, I know what this book is about, or what this book means. Can we do that? What if in the middle of the book says, I hate you? Can you say that this book is about hate? What if the entire book is about love, and then right in the middle of one chapter, a guy is upset with a girl and he says, I hate you? But we do this. We pull one verse, we don't even need to read the next verse, which can explain it. Or the verse before it, which can explain it. No. We take Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22. Bam. And then we act on it back. Submit. This is the God. This is the God. But this is the. Now listen. Anytime you're questioning something in the Bible, great. Question it. You must. You must question it. You have to. I'm telling you, you have to. I'm telling you, you have to. Other religions will say, don't look at it, don't think about it, don't argue it, accept it. No. Not with our God. Now our God encourages us to seek, to search, to knock. If you do it with an open heart, honestly, you will see the truth. This is God's promise. And I want every one of us here, as we're going through this, to have an open heart. What do I mean by an open heart? I already had discussions with a couple of people via text message once the announcement went out that this is the topic. And some of these people, and it's more than one person, it's like maybe 3 or 4 people. And these people text me and they're like, I know what this topic is about, and I just want you to know that this is going to be tough. Because I believe X, Y, Z, Z, A, B, C. They already told me what they believe. Now, anytime I'm having a discussion about the Bible, or leading a discussion about the Bible, I always like to give this example. Okay? Ready? In my job, and this is very serious and it applies here. It really does. It applies here. In my job, as a lawyer, when we have a case that we have to prove in front of a jury, okay, before we have the evidence in front of the jury, we have to pick who? The jurors. You know when you get a summons in the mail, oh, I've had jury duty, how do I get out of this? How do I lie and say I get, okay? Well, some people are not good at lying and they get stuck. And they're sitting as jurors. Each one of these jurors back comes into this courtroom with their own personality back, their own background, their own experience. Some people come into the courtroom and they hate police officers. They had a bad experience with a police officer and they can't stand cops. Well, guess what? My witness is who? A police officer. Do I want this juror? Do I want the juror? Why not? Does it matter what they hear? If this juror was beat up by a police officer, once the blue uniform takes the stand, they're going to say, I don't like it. And whatever they hear that's coming from this person, they're not going to want to believe. Fair? Isn't that true? Well, we all coming in here right now with our own different mindsets, guys. Our own different thoughts, our own different experiences, our own different backgrounds, our own different opinions on what we think about the Bible, our own different anger, possibly, sadness. I got maybe. And people who have these feelings inside of them, it doesn't matter if it's the Pope. It doesn't matter if it's the Word Himself, our God, who is speaking. They're going to close it off. There's no point. It's like talking to a rock. I'm not saying that about any one of you. I'm just saying you have to, no matter what the discussion is, you have to be fair. Don't believe it, but just be fair. Evaluate it fairly. That's all. I'm not expecting everyone to get up and say, I believe everything he said, and I'm walking out the door. But have an open mind, honest heart, and listen. And then, whatever happens, happens. Is everybody with me? Is that fair? Yes? All I'm asking is to be fair. Okay? All right. So, context. Next thing, culture. Along with context, you have to understand culture. We're gonna go into each of these 3 things. The third one being interpretation. Interpretation. And along with interpretation comes translation. Just remember these 3 things anytime you're reading something in the Bible or anything anywhere that you're reading. Context, the culture at the time that it was written, and the interpretation. / translation. Okay? Everybody with me? Okay. Because live free or die hard. Anybody see this movie? Bruce Willis? There's Die Hard, then there's Die Hard 2, then there's Die Hard 3. I don't know how this guy's almost going to die. Then there's Die Hard with a Vengeance. And then 20 years later, He's like 60 years old. He's like, I'm going to do another movie. Bruce Willis, Live Free or Die Hard. Well, the Daily News obviously gave a little blurb about the movie, right? A little critique. They wrote, hysterically entertaining was this movie. Wow, hysterically entertaining. Guy, that movie was hysterically entertaining. They are taking an excerpt from a commentator who watched the movie, and they're saying, these are what people are rating it. They're saying it's hysterically entertaining, right? You want to know what the actual written line was? The action in this fast-paced, hysterically overproduced, and surprisingly entertaining film is as realistic as a Roadrunner cartoon. Okay? You see the truth? You see what's being interpreted, misleading. Why am I saying this right now? Because you have to understand context, translation, interpretation. You can't just take it at face value. You have to see what it really means. Everybody with me? Okay? All right. Anybody ever see My Cousin Vinny? You seen My Cousin Vinny? Of all you people, who knows when we started? Let me tell you. Yeah, but, okay. The funniest movie you'll ever watch. All right? I love it. Okay? Yeah, maybe because of what I do. I experienced it differently. All right? And don't say it wasn't, because it was. You put me on the spot, you embarrass me, and I don't know how to continue. Okay. My Cousin Vinny is a movie about a guy who failed the bar exam like 7 times. He finally passes it. Okay, his nephew gets in trouble, but the nephew's innocent. Okay, his nephew's a guy who's with his friend. They go into a grocery store while they're driving, and they go and buy a can of tuna or something, and then they come out, and all of a sudden a shooting happens. Okay, and they fit the description, so they get arrested. And the guy's like, "I'm innocent. I didn't do this." So he's being interviewed by the cops. Okay. Look at what happens.
And we both applied and got scholarships to UCLA. So we figured the weather and the scenery would be nicer going for the south.
What about the tuna fish?
Then I forgot about the tuna fish, and then we lost it.
Did you catch your tuna fish? Is that how it started?
No, he didn't say anything.
But he knew about it.
No.
Let's talk about that.
Listen.
You paid for the groceries. And then what?
We went out to the car, and that's it.
What did you shoot?
What?
At what point did you shoot the clerk?
I shot the clerk.
Yes, when did you shoot him?
I shot the clerk.
Hey, Dan, you need you out here? I'm in the middle of a damn confession here. Whoa! Wait a minute!
Okay. So, in case you missed it, I'm going to tell you. Okay. What were the words out of his mouth? I can't harp this enough. I can't harp on this enough. What were the words out of his mouth? I shot the clerk. Was he trying to say that he shot the clerk? What was he saying? I shot the clerk. Well, sure enough, later on in the movie, the officer's testifying, and he's saying he made a confession to me. He did. What did he say? He said he shot the clerk. Well, what exactly did he say? He said, I shot the clerk. Did that really happen? Is it the same words? Is context important? Is context important? Do we need to know the circumstances surrounding that one line to know whether or not he really meant, I shot the clerk? Does everybody understand that concept? Because the same thing applies with the Bible. Everybody with me? Huh? Does everybody understand the concept? Okay. Let's talk about culture. Let's talk about, you're going to be hearing this word a lot, the role of men versus the role of women. Okay? And again, this comes to culture and tradition. I'll give you an example. Under Jewish law, men couldn't talk to women in public. What's a perfect example of that? Jesus meets somebody at the well. Who does he meet? The Samaritan woman. And as he's sitting at the well and he's talking to the Samaritan woman, after a while, who comes up to them? His disciples. And what's the first thing we read that the disciples say or think? He's speaking to a woman, and they're shocked. That's the only thing on their mind. How is this guy speaking to a woman? How is Jesus speaking to a woman? Women weren't allowed to talk in public. Is that, by the way, did Christ still speak to her? This becomes very important later on. Okay? We're going to take verses. We got to take verses from both sides. And then we deal with it. You say, what's going on here? Okay? Let's keep going. How about interpretation? Original language. Meaning of the word in another text. These two guys were going to jump down my throat, Kamel and Mina, because I mentioned a verse, and they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. In Greek, that's not what it means. In Greek, it means this. The word actually means this. The word is used in the New Testament. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Correct. And we're going to get there. Hold on.
I didn't see that.
Hold on. I give him credit. He's like, I didn't say that. All right, I'm sorry. Okay? We're going to get to it, I promise. Okay? What about the meaning of the word in other texts? Is it used the same way? Is it used in the same context? Does it mean the same thing? This requires a brain and reason, what God gave us. If you're going to make a judgment, do your research. If you're going to make a judgment, do your research first. Don't say the Bible said this and you haven't done any of this. No. By the way, those 6 verses that I talked about in the beginning, I don't think I'm going to leave them alone. We're going to break down every single one of them. Okay? The 6 verses that we just read, where everyone was like, oh my gosh, we're going to break down every single one of them. Okay? So don't worry. Consistent with the rest. Okay. Because, tell me you're not confused right now. Ready? Because in the same book that we just read about being a helper and being like subservient to man, woman, remember that? The verses? Okay. How come in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, it says, God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Who? Male and who? Male and who? Female created in God's image. Women, if anyone tells you that you are any less valuable than a man, they must be living in a different type of religion or in a different world. Because you were created the same way I was created, the same way he was created, and he was created in God's image. The same nature, the same essence, the same substance, created in God's image. Genesis chapter 1, before all of the other verses, verse 27. You're created in God's image. Very important, because I'm going to be honest with you. Unfortunately, some of the elders in our church, and I don't mean elders as in priests, I mean elders as in older people, is what I mean. The older people in the church, like the grandfathers and some of the babas, unfortunately, and this is truth, they take the Arabic culture from Egypt, okay, and then they take a verse in the Bible, and then they try to put it together. So they take whatever teachings there are in Egypt and other religions about the woman and the value of a woman, and then they'll take one of the verses that we discussed early on, and they'll say, look, you see, even the Bible says it. Therefore, you must not do this, and you must not do that, and you're worth this, and you're worth that. No. No. You are of equal value. I know you want to keep going. We're going to keep going. Okay? But I hope everybody's on the same page with me right now, with respect to that. We're jumping on that. Okay. How about the New Testament? That was just one verse in the Old Testament. There's a lot more, and we're going to get to it. Okay? How about, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son to whosoever believes in him. Male and female, everyone. When Christ came, did he come for all, or did he come for the man? And you know what? The helper, he said, okay, fine, I'll add them too if they want to, or even if, whatever. No, God came for everyone. Christ came for us all. Man, male, female, woman, lady, gentleman, all. Know that. Women know that. Believe that. And we're going to get into the difference between roles in the church and statuses. Are we of different status? No. But do we have different roles? Yes. And you might not be happy with the roles. But that's a different story. That's a different story. And we're going to talk about that. But you have to understand the difference between those two things. Okay, let's keep going. Okay? How about St. Paul? For there is neither who? Read with me. There is neither?
Jew.
Speak out loud together. There is neither?
Jew.
You guys say Jew. I meant nothing else. For there is neither?
Jew nor Greek.
Keep going.
There is neither slave nor free. There is neither male or female.
Neither what?
Male or female.
Neither what?
Male nor female.
There is neither male nor female. What does he mean? There's no difference in the eyes of God. There is no difference. You are all the same. You are all loved. You are all created in His image. We are all His love. We are all His creation. We are all together. There is no difference between a Jew or a Greek or a Gentile or this or that. No. Are you a human being created in God's image? He loves you the same way He loves me. You are no less. And the reason why I keep pointing at you three is because you're the only three here, but more people came in. So I'll go over. Okay? Let's keep going. Okay? How about in the Old Testament? Let's talk about some women in the Old Testament. Okay? How about Deborah? Because a lot of people say, no, Bishop, you keep talking about the New Testament. Let's talk about the Old Testament. Because the Old Testament bashes women. And you know what? There are some verses that I don't have up here, okay, that are really bad also. I'm gonna tell you. They're really tough. They're tough verses to look at, to swallow. Okay? They are very tough. I'm giving you the ones that I'm more familiar with, but I'll be happy to address whatever we'll talk about. But the point of this is to give you a way of thinking and a way of reading and a way of understanding that can apply to anything. Any verse, anywhere. So, Deborah, as we all know, is a judge who's very, very, very smart, who tricks an entire nation and has the chariots going in areas where they can't survive. And a war is won because of them. Now, gentlemen that are sitting here right now, okay? Some of you guys are like, man, this is about women. Couldn't he do this on a day where it's like, a spiritual day for women? No. Why? This is just as important for the men. In fact, quite honestly, it's more important for the men. Let me tell you why. Because God gave us a certain role to lead. And if your wife or your sister or your female friend doesn't know this, it's our job as men, based on the role that we were given, to encourage and to help. To be the helper as well. Everybody with me? So pay attention. Pay attention. Because don't think that you're not going to have this conversation with someone who doesn't believe in God, as a God. People are going to come to you and they say, oh, you go to church? Well, let me ask you a question. This church that you believe in and this Bible you believe in, do you believe in equality? Because I'm a female. Do you believe in equality? Yeah? So tell me why you rule over me. Can you explain to me why God says that you rule over me? Can you explain to me why your God, who you believe in, who's so fair, says in the same book, X, Y, Z? How are you going to answer? See, this is college here. If this was high school, we wouldn't be talking about this. If this was high school, we'd be talking about something else. We'd be talking about friendship, talking about love, talking about dating. Can I hold hands? Is it wrong? Can I look in her eyes for 5 minutes? That's the stuff they talk about in high school. Okay? And I'm sure some people are like, oh man, can we talk about some of that here too? Okay. Maybe we will later on, but for now, this is what we're talking about, okay? I can see whoever's grinning, those are the ones that caught you. Okay, I'm only kidding. Okay? So I'm just gonna keep going, just stay with me, okay? Because I'm gonna go a little bit faster now, okay? We have Esther, Queen of, by the way, we have books about women. Women in the Old Testament. Giving them praise, believe it or not. Respect. Deborah is a respected judge. Esther becomes queen of Persia. Okay? Who else do I have up here? Ruth, compassionate and caring, selfless, doesn't care about her future, no. She goes with her mother-in-law. But is exalted ultimately. Why are they in the Old Testament? Why are they given mention? Why are they given even one sentence in the Old Testament? From a God who hates and the Old Testament who hates. If you're going to argue, be fair. If you're going to argue, be fair. You're going to give one side, well, look at the other side. And then, you might be confused. That's fine. We'll talk about it. Because now you might be a little confused. Wait a second, Bishoy. If there are verses that are attacking, women, but then there are books that are praising women. Is God confused? God, the limitless, is confused, or maybe I'm confused? Which one? Okay? How about all the prophetesses, the deaconesses, right? You know, if you read the book of Proverbs, the last chapter, it talks about what the definition of a virtuous and perfect wife is. It's really beautiful, okay? You know what it says about a perfect wife? Because there are perfect wives out there, okay? It talks about the care that she has for her kids and the praise that her husband gives her because she's so glorious. Sense of humor. It says a whole bunch of things that you should read. Why would they say such nice things about a woman? Is a woman capable of being perfect? According to a God who hates women, no. So why is there a whole chapter about this? Does God hate women? All these people. How about all of God's people in the Old Testament? Not called sons. They're called the daughter. Zion. Just something to mention. Because some people really believe that God hates women. He hates women. Go online, you'll find hundreds of articles. God forbid you read them and then stop reading after that. God forbid you read them and then say, wow, I read all this. God hates all these women. Wow. I don't want to know this God. Or, no, I have faith. And then something goes wrong in my life, and then what do I remember? That article that I read. And then I go to Huna and say, Huna, I believe, but, last week this happened to me, and I'm faithful, and I still believe. Are you sure this God that you're talking about is the God of the Bible? Because I read so-and-so online. I did my research. No, you didn't. You read an article. Something bad happened in your life. And now you're blaming God. Let's be real. We're in college. We're the future. How much do we know? How much have we read? How much research have we done? How much Greek text have we looked into? How much effort did we really put into trying to really understand what was said, what was meant, who it was spoken to, what was the reason why it was said? What are we looking at? What are we doing? How about the one with the New Testament? I'm just going to scroll down. And I'm not even looking. But every single one of these women, not only in the face of Christ, but for most of these people, they were not just communicating with him, which was against the rules. No. He's touching women. He's touching them. He's healing them. He's forgiving them. He's praising them. He's congratulating them. This is a God who hates women? I'm confused. Oh, but I read a verse out of the thousands of verses in the Bible. I read a verse that said this. How bad? What about the love? We're going to ignore the love? We're going to ignore the adulterous woman? And the glory that she was given? The sinful woman? The touch of Christ on the people who we knew he was going to be judged by. Christ is the equalizer, guys. He's the one who equalizes. He's the one who gets rid of the old law and says, no, you guys don't understand. I'm here to fulfill. I'm here to make clear to you how it's supposed to be. I love all. I forgive all. Everybody with me? Okay? Look at all these characters. Why in the Bible, if women are hated so much, are like the first witnesses to the resurrection women? Well, I mean, if they're distrusted and they're hated, why mention them? How about Priscilla and Aquila? I'm going to talk about Priscilla and Aquila because I like Priscilla. Priscilla becomes very, very important later on when we talk about women and how women are supposed to be, subservient to men, not supposed to be preaching. Was Priscilla preaching, actually? Yes, she was. But wait a minute. Didn't we just read verses about how women are supposed to be silent? That's right. 4 out of 6 times, actually. That's right. 4 out of 6 times or something like that. It's Priscilla and Aquila. Mentioned first. Priscilla's mentioned first. Thanks. Okay? Now let's talk about those 6 verses that we talked about in the beginning. Because I'm confused. If there are verses that talk about women that are subservient to men, but then there are verses about love and equality, where's the discrepancy here? Is the discrepancy in the love, or is the discrepancy in my understanding of the quote-unquote hate? Okay? Well, this is something that someone brought up. I'm not sure if it was either Mina or Kamel. I will make him a helper suitable for me. I had one person come up to me and say, thanks, God. Thanks for making me a helper. Like Adam was walking around and, and there's misinterpretations of the Bible too, by the way. People misinterpret things. They take things out of context. Oh, and there's Adam and there's the animals. Like he had no one, he didn't want to be satisfied with any of them. So God said, all right, fine. Here. Take this. She's going to ruin your life, but go ahead. And this is what people think. Part of that is true. They do. I'm just kidding. Okay? So, I will make him a helper suitable for him. The word help is what, Kamet? Kamet? No? Okay. Who's the word helper? Mina, you said it also, right? Ezer, right? 21 times it's used in the Old Testament. 21 times, okay? Of those 21 times, 2 times it refers to Eve. 16 times it refers to who? Who? Who's the helper? The comforter. The holy? But the helper, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, will be your teacher in all things and will put you in mind of everything I have said to you. Think about that for a second. The same word that is used to describe the power of God, God himself, is used to describe the woman. Men cannot live without women. We cannot function without women. We need women. God created man, and then he created woman for man. Yes, for man. But without the helper, we cannot. It's right there. It's the same word. Is it? You see something? Even Moses' son, okay, he names his son Eliezer, which is the helper of God, okay? Just to show the value of that word and what it means, okay? Remember the difference between role and status, okay? Everybody with me? Okay. He shall rule over you. This is very interesting. He shall rule over you. When does God tell Eve that he shall rule over you? In other words, say again. After the fall? Is that what you're saying? Yeah, after the fall, right? It's not before the fall. It's after the fall. It's after Adam and Eve, after sin. Right, after they sinned. Okay, so let me ask you a question. Read Genesis chapter 4, verses 6 to 7. God is talking to Cain. Okay? And God says to Cain, if you misbehave, okay, sin will rule over you. Sin is crouching, okay, and it'll have its desire for you, and it will rule over for you. Is ruling over for you a positive thing or a negative thing? Negative, right? Okay. So when God says that man will rule over you, does he mean that man will rule over you because he's supposed to rule over you? Was this God's intention when he created man and woman? Or is this going to be the consequence of the sin because they sinned? Do you see how the context makes a difference? So when God says that he will rule over you, what he's saying is, man who's supposed to love his wife will now, because sin has entered the world, have pride, attempt to rule over you, so on and so forth. Does everybody understand that? That's it. Because he uses the same terminology 1 chapter later, 2 chapters later, in Genesis chapter 4. So he will rule over you. It's not like, ha ha ha, you're a subservient animal, man will rule over women now. No. Because sin entered the world, the perfection, the perfect couple, the perfect chemistry, the perfect nature, perfect love, no longer, that's it, it's broken. And unfortunately, as a consequence, man will rule over. Does everybody understand that? Because he uses the same terminology in Genesis chapter 4, referring to sin, ruling over Cain. Yeah.
That's because of the imperfection of the man, right?
That is because of the imperfection of man. Correct. The corrupted nature of man. Of both. Right.
Christ fixed it.
Right.
So that's very important to keep in mind. It didn't continue like that, but Jesus, when he came, he fixed that to the extent that I'm sure that we come to the St. Paul, Ephesians 5, we're going to extend it. So I'm waiting for
Yeah, no, please. It's very important it's very important to mention that. Okay. Okay. So let's go to the third one. The man is the head of the woman. Man is the head of the woman. Where do we find this? 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 3. Okay. If you look at this verse alone, by itself, in other words, you have to seriously white out the first portion of the verse and white out the last portion of the verse. And only read this portion of the verse and then say it's not fair. Or if you...
or in the Eastern, or let me put it this way, all Christians or Coptic men have no idea about anything in the Bible. That's the only verse they know. Aragon, grass and bark. Man, they don't know anything else but this. And I'm going to explain why. It might be.
No, please.
When you,
I'm not going to explain it.
Please do it. It's very interesting.
All right. Well, I'm not going to do as good a job as you, but if you read the entire verse, what does it say? Read the entire verse. It says, Christ is the head of every man, and the man is the head of a woman, and God is the head of Christ. Let's just take that last portion for a second. God is the head of Christ. I thought Christ is God. Is he?
Yes.
So is God. Thank you, man. Yeah, because I was worried for a second. I was like, wait, maybe Christ is. No, come on, guys. Christ is God, right? So when it says that God is the head of Christ, what do they mean? God who? God the Father is the head of Christ. Does that mean God the Father is greater than Christ? Wouldn't this conflict with all the other teachings? No. So what does it mean that God is the head of Christ? What does that mean? Does it affect status or does it affect function or role? Yes. God the Father has a function and a role. God the Son has a function and a role. God the Holy Spirit has a function, the helper, the Spirit of truth, the comforter, the advocate, the counselor. Function. When it says God is the head of Christ, does he mean that God is greater than Christ? Does it mean that man is greater than woman? Man in the back of the yes. A woman, please. No. Go.
This is so clear. I mean, you have to get it in the right sense that equality is always there, but roles are different. Not different, but unique. Everyone has a unique role. So you talk about God the Father sending God the Son, right? So that's how much. So God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten. This is the rule. So when you talk about the rule of God the Father, that he sent God the Son, doesn't mean that the Father is greater than the Son. They are equal, but everyone has a role. And God the Son said that he's going to send the Holy Spirit, right, to the disciples. Again, it's the role, but doesn't mean that God the Son is greater than God the Holy Spirit, because they are the three are one and equal. So the same thing, if you get it in that sense, about the man being the head of the woman, and role and responsibility, and it's going to come later and become much clearer when we move to Ephesians 5.
Thank you, Ron. And whatever else you have to say, please. Okay? And you know it says, I and the Father are one, obviously in the Gospel of John. Just an example in case we were doubting, if Christ was, Okay. So remember role versus status. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay. Nor was man created for the woman, but woman for the man. Okay? On its face, again, it appears to be a verse that has superiority and inferiority and subservience on behalf of the woman, right? what? Woman is just created for man? Okay? But if you notice, if you keep reading, St. Paul actually completes like the circle of dependence. Okay? Because at first it appears that man is dependent upon woman. But then when you continue reading, neither is man independent of woman, nor woman independent of man in the Lord, for as woman came from man, even so man also comes through a woman. Guys, I'm just reading the next couple of verses. Okay? Let me just say something real quick. Okay? Pay attention. Not because this is misogyny. No. That's not the purpose of this discussion, to be honest with you. The purpose of this discussion is to realize that you cannot take a verse and build your faith or a belief on a verse. This is an example of how, when people confront you who don't know the Bible, they may have just heard one verse. You cannot let that shake you. You have to tell them and explain to them there is so much more. And if you don't know the answer, you have to tell them, listen, this requires research. Because it was written in one language. And I'm reading another language. And the context can get confused, the interpretation can get confused. So I have to do my research. Now, the intelligent Christian would have already done research on the big issues. Already prepared to defend. Everybody with me? That's the point of this. Not just misogyny. I'm giving you examples to see how you can take it and apply it. Let me tell you guys something, okay? When I was in college, I'll be honest with you. I was sitting here and I would be killing myself during a lecture like this. I'm being honest with you. I don't feel that with you. I'm so impressed with the people that I'm standing in front of right now. I'm humbly being completely honest and telling you, and those who are streaming too, because I know some of the people who are streaming. I am so impressed with the level of knowledge and intellect that you guys have. Really. You guys are able to understand this. I was not able to understand this at your age. I didn't care to be honest. This is a different generation, and times are different now. Back when I was in college, it was different. It wasn't questioning stuff the way it is now. Back then it was just sin and fighting dating, what people were dating, and my friends were going through, alcohol, so on and stuff like that. In this day and age, it's questioning, it's intellect, it's doubting. And you guys are here because you want to know, you want to be prepared. Because I'm telling you right now, do not underestimate the power of God in you. Don't underestimate the power of God in the conversation that you may have with someone. Guys, I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Listen to me. People's lives are changed because you attended a lecture and were able to share something that the Spirit has given you. Salvation is given to people. Eternal life is given to people because you came to a meeting and opened your mind and listened. That is the point. Not misogyny. It's having faith knowing that what I read on its face may not be what it means. Because there's perfect examples on how it looks one way, but it means something else. Is everybody with me? Do not underestimate the power of God in you. Please. Please. Okay? Please. I'm watching crazy things, guys, in the world. Crazy things. People asking questions and getting answers and doing research and turning away from what they thought was true and seeing the truth because of people in our church who care. This is God alive. This is God alive working. Okay. Now all the women need to shut up, okay? All right? Because it says, let your women keep silent in the churches. By the way, if someone were to stream right now and heard me say, let all the women shut up, what would he think? That's all you heard. Oh, wow, this guy believes in this verse. This is just another example of how taking out of context. Thank you. You with me? You with me? Okay, good. All right. Let your women keep silent in the church. 1 Corinthians 11:9. Okay. And Abuna, I am going to need your help on this one because this one's tough. Okay? This is 1 Corinthians 11:9. Let your women keep silent in the churches. It sounds as if St. Paul believes that the women should never ever speak ever. In fact, there are some denominations of Christianity that actually take that verse extremely literally And the women are not allowed to speak. When I say speak, I mean in a meeting like this, they're not allowed to speak because they're in a church building. There's some denominations, I have friends at work, who their wives sit down and they can't open their mouth. At all. In a meeting like this, you wouldn't be able to participate and say, I have a question. Or, I know I want to share something. Just so you know that. Okay? Okay? Now, if you read a few verses before that, though, okay? And I know what some of you guys are thinking. Don't think I'm stupid. So, all right, sure, but if we go upstairs, I can't go up to the pulpit and read a psalm during Holy Week. Or I can't wear deacon. I can't do. We're going to talk about all of this, okay? Every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, dishonors his head. A few verses before. But every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. Every woman who what? Who what? Who what?
Praise.
Prays or what? Wait, but I thought that they're supposed to keep silent. What do you mean every woman who prays or prophesies? Aren't they supposed to keep silent? It's 3 verses before it. Women are supposed to be silent at all times? But then how are they praying or prophesying? And they're supposed to cover their heads. Do you see the context? How many people rose their hand and they said, oh, this verse really bothers me. Let the woman be silent. Right? Did you know that 3 verses before it says, but every woman who prays or prophesies? The person who's prophesying is doing what? Isn't she preaching? Isn't she vocalizing her preaching? She's prophesying. It's clear. So then what did he mean? I'm confused. They can prophesy, but they have to keep silent? Where do we reconcile? What do you guys think? Both of them can't be true. Can they? What do you guys think? This, by the way, is Bible study. This, what we're doing right now, is Bible study at its core. This isn't, I'm going to talk about it again just for a second, okay? How old do I have to be before I can, go to Applebee's with him? Okay? When we go to Applebee's, is that considered a date? What if I bring a friend? What if she sits next to me and our hands accidentally touch? My pinky touched his and it felt good. Is that a sin? What Guys, I hear this stuff, guys. I kissed her on the cheek, but the corner of my lips touched hers. Bro, go read the Bible, okay? Study something, Habibi, and don't worry about that, okay? You're forgiven. Don't do it again, okay? Kiss her on her ear next time so that you don't come close to her. Wait, what do you want me to say? And you're laughing because you know that this is true. Right, exactly. But I'm also saying this so that we can get some laughs in here because it's like dead silent and I'm about to faint because it's so hot. But just pay close attention to the fact that there is a discrepancy in a matter of 3 or 4 verses. Can somebody reconcile that for me? What do you guys think? News. Does everyone here agree that there's a discrepancy?
I have a small question.
Yes.
So basically for us, like in our culture or in our church, women aren't allowed to come to the altar, the pulpit, or read or none of that stuff. So basically they're kind of restricted from certain things. However, men on the other side, it's not like there's something for women only where we're restricted from it. So doesn't that kind of show a lopsidedness with the prophet? Like I understand that he says prophets and stuff, but it comes to a point where you can, like visually we all see that there's a little difference here. So
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. What do you guys think of that? What do you guys think of that?
Is this a status or a role?
well, I understand that there's rules.
Is
So
it a status or a role? Would this make the woman less? If there's certain roles that can be done by certain people.
yeah, but what I'm saying that there's no role for a woman in the church that a man can do, other than the maternal roles and the stuff that's outside the church as well.
You cannot be a wife, right?
No, I'm saying other than the stuff outside.
You cannot conceive, you cannot conceive and have babies, right?
Yeah.
So there are certain rules for the women.
No, I'm saying
that
other than
they never
those.
do.
I'm saying other than those, but inside the church there's restrictions.
It's okay, I understand it. It's a question about rules, not discrimination. You get the idea?
Yeah.
And the problem here is that everyone thinks he can do everything. Okay? And Coach Shinura would say something very nice. He would say, humble yourself and be like St. Mary. I think the role of St. Mary in the church as the Mother of God, the icon of the church, there is no greater role than her, right? But she didn't acclaim to herself or acquire to herself that she should be the head of the church of the apostles. Right? You understand that she knew her role. But her role was very significant all the time. All the time, not only when our Lord was on earth here with us after his death and resurrection. She continued to have this role as the mother and the icon of the church and the mother of all the disciples. John took her to himself as his mother. But this didn't contradict the fact that she doesn't have to be playing other roles. You understand the idea?
And if I can also add to that, would you agree with me that there are some innate qualities that enable women to serve in certain capacity better than men? Innately?
Yeah, I want to say something.
Please.
That in our church, the best servants or teachers, Sunday school teachers, we don't call them teachers because it's misconception, servants for children, especially in the younger ages, are women. And they are by tens and hundreds and thousands and hundreds of thousands in our church, everywhere in the world. Because they have this role, they have this capacity. The motherhood can communicate and deliver a lot of messages of love, of Christ, and teach and educate that maybe a lot of men cannot do. So this is even another role that is well played by women in our church. It's not something, it's not a secret. You all know about that.
Thank you, Wayne. And that's and another, just to even add on to that also. Mina brought up the whole weaker vessel that St. Peter talks about, because that's another verse. But if you take the word weaker, it's used, believe it or not, in Greek in the physical sense, as in weaker. Okay? Now he may have meant it in the spiritual or in other areas. But if you were to take it literally, it's physical. The fact that God created man physically stronger, generally speaking, than women. Do you think that's wrong? Because quite honestly, I never hear any complaints about that. I never hear anyone saying, well, why didn't God make women stronger with muscles? Why doesn't anybody ever complain about that?
I might say something that
Oh, you heard someone complain about that?
I might say something that might seem very foolish, but if you see a woman with these muscles, they're going to run away. Men will run away. It doesn't go with the feminine vision of the woman.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
I'm not saying that, but I don't think it's. But I want to say something about the weaker. When there's a weaker, that means there's a
Strong.
No, I'm sorry. Weakest, there is what before? Weak. There's a weak and there's a weaker. So doesn't mean that the woman is the weaker vessel, that the man is stronger. No. The man is weak and the woman is weaker. So we share the weakness. It's not about I'm strong and you're weaker. In English, if you understand I'm sure your understanding is better than me. But very simple. There is weak, weaker, and weakest. Okay? So when we talk about men and women in this context, it's about men, you are weak. So be humble and be good to the weaker, which is the woman, because when you stand in front of me, I would have mercy on you. But if you think you are strong and you disguise your women, then I'll show you how much you are weak. That's what it means. This is the meaning of it. A weak and a weaker. Not anything else.
Thank you, Ron. Now, I want to know if you actually ever heard of this explanation about how, and you see how in the second line, guys, I write church in Corinth or church in Queens? Who was St. Paul writing to? I'll give you a hint. Queen's Church didn't exist in 55 AD. So who was he writing? Wow, you guys really believe it. All right, it did exist in 55 AD, but he wasn't talking to Queen's Church. Who was he writing to? St. Paul. The church in Corinth. Did St. Paul know, and this is important, okay? This is important. Did St. Paul know that in the year 2014, for sure he's going to be standing up and he's going to be giving a lecture trying to explain the fact that it says women remain silent in the church? Now, don't take that out of context. That doesn't mean that the Bible doesn't apply to us today. No. Don't take it out of context. What it means is he's actually writing for a particular purpose. He's teaching God's word and God's principle, but he's writing to a group of people for a specific purpose. And in fact, if you read on this stuff, you learn, and you can read it in 1 Corinthians, okay, that the church was actually going through a lot of problems at this time. There were people, it was chaotic. Nobody was listening to each other. Elders were speaking. People were speaking out of turn. People were giving false prophecies at the time. At this time, those who were more versed in the word were the ones who should speak. And at that time, it wasn't the women. It was the men. I'm sorry. This is how it was. So it's as if we're here right now, and there's someone who never comes to church, for example. And then we have the people who always come to church. And the people who, are jokers. And someone comes up here and he says, you guys keep silent. You guys handle the situation. Because this person is new. And we don't want these guys to scare this person. Did everybody understand that idea? Okay? So there was an issue going on in the church. And he's trying to regulate and make sure that the chaos ends. So he's regulating. So it's in a certain context. Does it mean women must remain silent? We just showed you that 3 verses before it. He didn't mean that. You see how you take one verse out of context, it ruins everything? Is everybody with me on that? Okay? Everybody with me on that? Okay. Let's keep going. Okay. How about this? Women, submit to your husbands. This is the one in the wedding when the man is standing next to his wife and he looks to her and you see him, you see one of these. Okay? Sometimes you see women who are not Christian. Okay? They look at the man and they say, what? I'm not submitting to you. You call this a religion of equality? Women submit to your husband? I've seen that too. In fact, my own wedding, I had people come that weren't Christian. I mean, they're Christian, but they weren't Orthodox. Okay? And they're Christian by name, they didn't know the word very well. And they come to me and they say, women submit to your husbands? What is that? What do you mean submit? What are you? A woman is supposed to submit to what? She's a slave? She submits to her husband? I submit to you. Oh, my master, I submit to you. This is how we interpret it. Take the author. Take the book. Take the chapter. Is that what he's trying to say in the chapter? Overall? No. The book? Overall? No. The author himself in his writings. Is this what he's saying? No. The New Testament. Is this the teaching of the New Testament? No. God. Is this the teaching of God? No. So we're going to take one verse and base our whole religion and our own faith and belief and decisions on what we're going to believe in on one verse when everything else doesn't match? Or we're going to look at that verse, women submit to your husbands. And by the way, it's like 3 verses about instructions for women, but the retards, the men, we get all this. Women just
submit to your husbands. And we're going to talk about this word submit. Okay? Women, submit to your husbands. But husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself to her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with washing with water by the word, and he would present to her to himself a glorious church, not having spot. You see the difference, guys, in the instructions between submission of man versus the submission of woman versus the love of man. You see the instructions from man towards women is to love. Doug, let me ask you a question. Where do we read about love in the New Testament? Everywhere, right. But what chapter in the book of 1 Corinthians? Chapter 13, exactly. Thank you. What's your name? Huh? Lily. I heard about you, and I heard about you today, because you know Raymond Valeria. You guys know Ray? You know Ray Valeria. One of my best friends at work. Do you mind if I introduce you? I'm sorry. I couldn't wait to talk to you afterwards, and now that you just said something, I'm going to embarrass you. I'm so sorry, okay? So I have a friend at work. His name is Ray Valeria, okay? He's a Christian guy, loves God. Me and him pretty much came into the DA's office together like 9 years ago, and we became best of friends, okay? We share the word together, we go to each other's houses for barbecues. He texts me today, and he's like, I know somebody at your church. He's Coptic, and he's friends with someone that I know. And they're here, and they're talking about the life meeting or something on Sunday. And I was like, Cop, my church, and we're coming. Like, this is so happy. So whenever we have friends that get together, it's awesome. So, all right, I didn't mean to announce it. All right. So, husbands, love your wives. Okay? Do you see the difference between husbands loving wives? Again, I'm going to say it again. Do you see the instructions from man to woman versus woman to man? Everybody see that? Okay. Please.
That's first. This is 5:20. If you read verse 5:21, if anyone can pick up Ephesians 5:21, read out loud.
Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ.
Do you hear that? Say again.
Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ.
This is just my verse before that. Submit to one another. In this context, it's about something that's very important that should exist between the man and the woman in marriage, which is respect versus love. It's not about slavery or servitude, it's about respect. And the other aspect is the aspect of love. When you think of the love of man to the woman, it's not the sensual love, it's not the filial love, it's the agape love. Because why we're asked to love our women. Every man will love his wife as who love? As whose love? Imitate who? And how did Christ love his church? What did he do for his church? Huh? Let me hear it. I want to hear it.
Gave his life.
Huh?
He gave his life.
He عمل ايه?
Gave his life.
Gave his life. Okay, so every man is asked to sacrifice his own life for the sake of the woman he's married to. What would you think the woman who had a husband who's sacrificing his life for her sake would do to her husband? You get that? Or not yet? Step back. Very short. So this is the point that I wanted what Bishop is trying to say here is there is so much demand on men because actually St. John Chrysostom said something very interesting. He said, when we ask women to submit to their husbands, considering that this man is led, or the head of this man is Christ, but if the woman is wiser because she is more spiritual, let the man listen or submit to the woman. You understand the idea here? It's all about who is being led by who. If you're led by, the man is led by Christ, by the Spirit of God, and Christ is his head, then it's going to be very easy for a woman to submit to him in the sense of respect and trust in him that what he's doing is from the Lord. It's not about servitude. At the same time, this man is sacrificing his life for the sake of the one whom he loves. He's willing to, not by words but by deeds, not only to wash her feet, but to sacrifice his own life for her sake. And this is what Jesus did and taught to us, that man should wash the feet of the woman, as Christ did. Because Christ taught us that in the Last Supper, where he washed the feet of the disciples. And he said, you do that to others, or to one another. So that's the role of the master, who is a servant. The one who has the role of leadership, that it's a serving leadership, not a servitude. That you want to make this woman a slave to him. That's not a concept at all. I hope this.
The leadership is actually by title leader, by action servant. Okay. And finally, guys, this is the second to last slide. Just another example from St. Paul. And the reason why I like pulling from the same, not only the same author, but the same book, is to show that there is more than one example that he's giving about what love and is supposed to be, okay? And the relationship between man and woman, the way it's supposed to be. So here's another example. Let the husband fulfill his duty to his wife, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise also, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but who? But his wife does. Equality. You see? Okay? Everybody with me? So now if you take one verse, dangerous, right? In conclusion, context. Look at other verses in the same book. Other books by the same author. The overall message of the Bible, the teachings of Christ, who he is, the essence of him. You don't take one verse only, okay? Culture. It's not an excuse, but it's a reality. There's certain things that are done and said, like the disciples are shocked that Jesus is speaking to a Samaritan woman. Do we blame the disciples that they're thinking this way? Or was this the culture at the time? Right? Okay? And finally, the interpretation. Remember translation, translation, translation. Oftentimes, guys, things get lost in translation in our own minds. We have a certain interpretation of something and translation of something, and it's not exactly accurate. Now, does anyone here think that St. Paul is a misogynist? Be honest. After taking things into consideration, all the different verses that apply. Is Christ, our God, a misogynist? Hates women, considers women to be subservient to men. Something that you should think about, obviously, in your own time. Okay? If anybody ever needs this PowerPoint slide to tear it apart or to look through it or to research things based on what it says, just let me know and I'll email it to you. And that's it. Any questions? No? Okay. Luna? We have another. Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. For sure.
Does anybody have announcements?